is that it has to do with the quality of your thoughts. So it's the future. Anxiety largely comes from obsessive thinking or obsessive thoughts about the future.
Bill Jackman, thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's our first one got scrambled.
Yeah,
It's
that's okay.
I was using some studio equipment that was over my head, and that didn't work out. But you came back.
Right on.
Really
Well,
appreciate
here's
that.
round two. Let's go.
The reason I wanted to get you on, uh, you've been a business owner, um, entrepreneur, and known to be a stressful endeavor. So really want to get into your ups and downs with that.
Sure.
All right, so you are a prolific entrepreneur, previously a professional magician, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
You have been involved in such projects as restaurants. You were the owner of a comedy club. You're a marketing professional and responsible for generating over $150 million in revenue in your career. Very impressive, man.
Yeah.
Very
Thank you.
impressive. How did you become interested and when did you become interested in being an entrepreneur?
For me, an entrepreneur was at a very young age. So, like, I was literally a child. And you start off doing backyard carnivals, and then that morphed into catalog sales door to door, and then it became, delivering the Evening Telegram, delivering the Newfoundland Herald. So I just went through. It was always kind of, uh, marketing, selling things, even as a child. My father was a manufacturer's agent, so I did learn a lot from my father. And one time, one story that happened was he brought in a tractor trailer load of garbage bags one night. They were called happy bags. And anyway, we had like hundreds and hundreds of cases of these garbage bags in our basement. And so I just got it upon myself one day just to start going door to door selling garbage bags.
Wow.
And then someone called my father, several weeks later, saying, "Mr. Jackman, just wondering if we could buy some more of those garbage bags from you." And he goes, "Where did you get them from?" Oh, he said there was a young man came to my door selling them for like, a dollar a package or something. I was practically giving them away, right? But anyway, so I was always, you know,
What was your dad's reaction to that?
well, I mean, he wasn't angry. He just laughed because he just knew that was just a part of who I was, right? So yeah, so I started at a very young age, doing those types of things, um, and then so entrepreneurialism was always, I guess, my father was the role model that I saw because he was a self starter and became a manufacturer's agent. Back in the day, we were the first ones in St. John's to have a video game. So the first kind of video game came out was called Telstar, and it was by a company called Coleco. And
You were a popular head.
yeah, and our house, yeah, we had people from all over the city used to come to the house because Dad would demo this video game. So, and it was just the tennis and the pong, just a little white ball that would go across the screen, and you had little
The dials.
little dial to move the paddle up and down. I mean, we're talking or mid '70s, right? So mid '70s or yeah, towards '77 or something, somewhere in that range. Anyway, it was around Star Wars when Star Wars came out. So yeah, so I think a lot of influence came from my father that way of being independent, being an entrepreneur. And I think in hindsight, I look back at it now. Dad passed, 14 years ago, but I think in hindsight, I was always kind of trying to get his attention and get his approval. And he did a lot of traveling across the province, visiting all kinds of retail stores and furniture stores and so forth. And so when I had holidays from school, I would often go on trips with him, and he would do sales calls, and sometimes I'd wait in the car, sometimes I'd go in with him. So that was pretty cool,
So you
you
got
know.
firsthand experience.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, seeing it firsthand, and so it was that was I think that's where I got my start, and then when I was in high school, I actually started a fruit and vegetable business when I was in high school, and I used to run that in the summer times, and that started to grow. And so by the time I graduated high school, I had a full-on fruit and vegetable market up on the Southern Shore. And then when I was 19, this is when things changed because I had, as a child, I was also involved in magic, as you had mentioned earlier, as a magician. So I had this passion for magic as well. And so around 18, 19, I wanted to leave and I was going to go to up to Toronto and become a magician in Toronto. And there was a magic show up there, an ongoing magic show that I was going to audition for and kind of, uh, throw my top hat in, hopefully. But
Yeah.
so what happened was my father came to me and he basically asked me, he said, "How much money do you have in the bank before you go to Toronto?" So I told him I had some money saved up, and he said, "Yeah, that's not going to last very long." And so he told me about an opportunity of a restaurant that was for sale in St. John's, and he said, "If you're interested in getting the restaurant business, he said I will help with the financing and helping make it happen. But there is a restaurant for sale in St. John's. That the building itself with the equipment it needs to be moved off the location." And he said we can get it at a really good price, and we could move it up here to Mobile, and you could start a restaurant. And the restaurant, you know, you'd make lots of money on the restaurant, and then you'd be able to buy what props you need and really set yourself up good, as a professional magician. So he gave me a couple of weeks to think about it. But a week went by, and I said, okay, you know what? I thought about it long enough. Let's do this restaurant together. And so Dad and I and my mother, we did the restaurant together. And at first, I was running everything for like 3.5 years. Dad was still working full time, so the restaurant, and then my mother was working with me because she had been working in the fruit and vegetable business as well with me. And so we started the Captain's Table restaurant in Mobile, and Captain's Table started in 1988. It's still running today. My niece Melissa Barrington and her husband essentially purchased from the family because after 3.5 years, I got out of the restaurant business. Mom and Dad then took it over and ran it for decades. Uh, Throughout that time, I helped on and off in different time periods when they needed some extra help, especially on the marketing side of things. And then back just after my father passed, it was closed for a short period, about a year, and then my mother ran it for another number of years, and then ended up selling it to her niece, I should say, Melissa, and her husband doing a fantastic job running the Captain's Table restaurant. Back a couple of years ago, it won the world's best fish and chips award from the London Journal. It's won all kinds of community awards for the best fish and chips. And so, really proud of them because they've maintained the standards and the quality, that that my mother and father established, with the Captain's Table. So all of that's, and
Yeah.
I've got more of those types of stories because I did different things, but that's kind of the background of where I started.
So you clearly have a lot of drive for that stuff.
For sure.
For you, is it, you know, the fruits that can come from your labor, or is it love the game that keeps you going with this stuff?
That's a really good question. I think being in business was more about independence, and it's more about having control over your life. And so, like when you're in business, I used to say this for years. When you're in business for yourself, you're working for a maniac because you're working for yourself. And so you have to be disciplined. You have to push yourself. There's nobody that is, you're answerable to yourself. So there is that sense of independence. And I think that in the way that the world is, Jordan, being an entrepreneur is the closest that you're ever going to get to having freedom,
I believe
at
that.
least freedom in the way that our society is structured, right?
Hmm.
One of the things about being a business owner or being an entrepreneur is that oftentimes when everyone else is on, statutory holidays, you're working. Like entrepreneurs typically don't take holidays or. And so, it has its ups and downs, but I think the sense of independence that comes from it and knowing that you're charting your own course, and at the end of the day, your business is going to be successful based on your results.
Yeah,
There's nobody else that you can blame. It's kind of, I know you and I talked previously about the martial arts and stuff. It's like when you're in martial arts, you're only as good as of the skills that you've earned. You can read all the books you want about martial arts, same thing, but you'll understand, but you won't know martial arts until you actually do it.
yeah,
And so when you become a black belt, you've earned that. You've worked hard for that, and nobody can take that away from you, right? And so being an entrepreneur is kind of the same feeling. It's like you're out there on your own, and you're driven to make it work because it's your sense of independence, right? The other aspect that I would say is that I just love creating opportunities for other people. And so businesses, when you start a business, it's very much about, when you hire employees, you're giving them an opportunity for employment,
Mhm.
right? And in my lifetime, I've employed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And some of those people were in university at the time, uh, and needed extra income to supplement to get through university. And then I see them go off to become engineers or become other types of professionals, and doing quite well in their life, right? Which is very satisfying. I've seen other people from the magic side of things. I've seen people who were radio announcers go from being a radio announcer to going to the Chevet College of Magic and becoming a magician now that travels around the world and performs, and so
Very cool.
I've kind of I really enjoy that. I've seen people who have worked for me, helped in various functions, and next I'm watching them on Just for Laughs on CBC,
That's cool.
and they're on stage, and now they're or they're writing for This Hour's 22 Minutes, or so I've seen that, right, and I've also seen companies that I've helped, you know, in my marketing life as a marketing expert. I've helped companies, and I've seen companies go all the way to selling to $2.7 billion. And so I've been a part of that.
It
And
sounds like you planted a lot of seeds for people and
yeah,
watched them grow, which is must be very rewarding.
it
One
is.
thing I want to go back to is when you mentioned about freedom, the freedom you get when you
Yeah,
work for yourself, and I'm sure we all have friends and family members, but I know people that went to law school and became lawyers, and they're working all the time for recreational time with their family, and they're really in a golden handcuffs kind of situation,
yeah,
and I think everyone longs for the freedom of entrepreneurial or the entrepreneurial experience, and it's interesting to see, especially people on the upper echelon of you know careers that still wish they didn't have to go to work on Monday.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I get no. I know where you're coming from. I remember one time some years ago, one of the lawyers that did work for me. We had to meet on a Sunday afternoon at the law firm, and I just asked him. I said, "Is this like unusual?" And I said, "I have to do this every weekend. I have to work Saturdays and Sundays. I'm here. I'm trying to get caught up on all of the paperwork. And anybody on the outside would see this individual as a very successful lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
but here he is, Saturdays and Sundays in the office, meeting with clients and trying to get caught up on the week's work, right? So I understand the golden handcuffs idea, right? Is that a lot of times you have to be very careful about. One thing about life is that one of the things I've learned, because I'm past the halfway point, so I now have fewer years ahead of me than I have behind me. And one thing that I've learned is that it's getting shorter and shorter. Like you just realize as you get older, you really start to it starts to crystallize, and you go, wow, life is like really short. And so you really don't have any time to waste. That's why, like every day, when I wake up, I'm grateful for every single day that I'm alive again and I'm here. And I try to make the most of every day. Now, wasn't always like that. I was always like go 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 and just like driven. Now I'm kind of slowing down and kind of appreciating and trying to savor every day as much as possible. And but I see that so many people, they go in to get an education, which is admirable, and I encourage everybody to get the best education that you can in the area of interest that you have a passion for, that you have
Mm-hmm.
some desire for, that you enjoy, right? However, there's many people that have pursued careers and invested heavily in their education, and then gone down a certain path and become a certain professional, and we call it professionally collared, because
It's a
essentially
good.
you can't, because you're licensed or you have to be registered. You really don't have a whole lot of flexibility in terms of moving to another location. because you're licensed only, as a licensed professional, you're only in a certain area, let's say. So they become kind of professionally collared, and then it becomes a grind. And they have the external perception out there. Everybody sees them as, oh, they're a big professional, they're making all kinds of money, and they're driving nice cars, and they live in a nice house, and they have all the trappings of what success is, and yet oftentimes they're absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
Like they absolutely dread every day. Like I know people who are living in huge, very expensive homes, and they keep all the heat off in all their rooms. Like they're essentially they're making all this money to a certain extent, but at the same time they don't even enjoy it. Like they're you know
Well, how many times you can read about comedians and celebrities and entrepreneurs that are in rehab, for some drug addiction or alcoholism because they're miserable,
right,
and something you said about people that go and they do something that's passionate. If you're passionate about criminal law and you become a criminal law lawyer, I'm sure then it's a passion project. But if you were kind of driven to a place because of money or maybe influence from your parents or whatever brings you there, and you're not passionate about it, it doesn't matter how much money you bring.
right.
You still got to work at that stuff every day. So it's yeah, I can see that being
Yeah,
a
and
bad
then
place to be.
yeah, no, absolutely. And then all of a sudden, all that is fine, right? Like I heard this recently that you think you have problems, but you have no problems until you have a health problem.
Hmm.
And as soon as you have a health problem, that's the only problem that you really have, because
Yeah.
all of a sudden money, everything just kind of pales in comparison. So there's that aspect of it. And that's why I say as you get older, you start to realize, not regret, but like the amount of time that you potentially wasted, pursuing certain things that you know it's always like that happiness is somewhere off into the future,
Hmm.
and that when I get this done, when I get to this level, when I get this job, or when I get this far, I'm going to be happy.
Yeah.
And what I've learned, largely because I've done so much work internally in terms of meditation and kind of connecting with God and having really good conversations with God, and really kind of putting myself really into the present moment as much as possible every day. Most of the pain that people are suffering from, is either coming from the fact that they're spending a lot of their time in this moment
Yeah.
thinking about the future and how uncertain that may be, or they're spending time thinking about what happened to them. And yourself, if you get into a conversation with someone, right away you can tell where they are, because they'll either immediately start talking about their past and what just happened last week, last month, last year, and they have their whole story, right? And every day they keep telling themselves that story of the past. And so they keep kind of like dragging the past into this present moment, and or they're focused. Oftentimes they may shift, and some people then try to pull the future, which doesn't even exist, trying to pull that into the present moment.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like they create this tension, right? They're dragging the past, they're pulling the future, they're putting it together, and they're stressed out. And then of course you've got all kinds of depression, anxiety, all kinds of things that are happening. And when that's being put on your body, the body is reacting to all of that as if it's all real and it's happening in real time.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden you've got all these health problems. Now you've got headaches and aches and pains, and
Heart
because the
issues.
body is trying to deal with everything,
All that stress.
all this mental stress and input that's coming in.
I heard a quote which I will butcher, but it was anxiety comes from the future and depression comes from the past.
Right,
And stress is brutal.
right,
It's a killer, and you know it's definitely comforting if you can, and following God or having faith in a higher power is so important there, because if you stop trying to control everything, if you're trying to take back the past, which is impossible, control the future, it's a headache. But if you can say, look, there's a path for me, things will open up, and I'll just work hard at what I'm doing. It's definitely, and being present is definitely a lot easier on you than being like, oh my God, this is coming up next year. I want to be here. How am I going to do it? I'm failing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a big stressor. Going back to the restaurant. So you're like, I'm going to Toronto. Your father helps you find your way into the restaurant business.
Yep.
Did you then go to Toronto after your success with the restaurant?
Well, I did the restaurant for 3.5 years, and then another opportunity came up. So I ended up actually going to work for the as an instructor with the Eastern Community College, and so I did that, and that was kind of as an instructor. I traveled all over Newfoundland and Labrador, so I got to stay. At one point, I got to stay in almost every hotel in the province. At one point, I could say that I literally had eaten in every restaurant in the province. So it was quite the experience. I really got to see every nook and cranny of Newfoundland and Labrador, which was pretty awesome. And at the same time, I was incorporating some magic into my instruction and so forth. But I never did take the move. I never did make the big move to go to Toronto and become a professional magician in that sense. But one of the things that did happen was I started to go to magic conventions, and I became really good friends with some real famous magicians who kind of took me underneath their wing, and so it was a big influence. And I started to kind of appreciate the fact that even as a professional magician, you really have to love what you're doing because it's going to be, it's going to be a grind. Like you got to oftentimes we just see the end result of someone's success. We don't see the struggles and what they go through. Like I have a buddy of mine now who's doing really well. He's a fairly well known magician. He's been on TV a number of times. And he is traveling all the time. And I'm following him on social media. And like he has family at home, but he's constantly, you know, one day he's in Fort Lauderdale, the next day he's up in Ontario, the next day he's over. Like he's constantly traveling, and like you, even that part of it, you have to love traveling and flying, and it's not this dream everybody has of, oh, I'm going to have a big show in Vegas and I'm just going to be a resident magician there. There's only a handful of people that are actually doing that, and even so, that I've heard that is very challenging. So so that whole thing. So the magic thing for me. So I go off and I'm doing the instruction as an instructor, and I really started to enjoy that and kind of said, oh, maybe this is my thing. I really like this. And but then I started still doing magic shows. I was doing magic shows for festivals and corporations, for trade shows, for birthday parties, you name it. I was Christmas parties were very busy too. So I did that for 15, almost 20 years of doing magic shows. And then myself and my wife had our first child. And for anybody that has young children, you know how exhausting that can be. It's exhilarating, but it's exhausting at the same time. And so it just got to a point where I something had to change. I couldn't do it all. So I literally hung up the top hat and said, you know what, I'm gonna stop doing the magic shows, um, and I'm just gonna focus on my business. And my business was Jackman brand marketing at the time, and Jackman brand marketing was taken off, and I ended up, with 10 employees, and I went through the whole having a physical business with offices and a CFO and kind of building that type of an organization, and that was fun too because I also there was a lot of parallels between magic and marketing because of the communication aspects of marketing and creating perceptions, and so I got did a lot of work in terms of branding and brand marketing, and then over time became recognized as a brand marketing expert in my own right by some very big names, and so that was kind of all exciting as well. And so I found that I could kind of use my magic skills to help businesses with their marketing and to improve their marketing, and really, and like a lot of times businesses are having difficulties with their marketing because they don't realize that there's something wrong with their strategy. And so we can also this also applies to our life, right? So one of the big lessons that I learned And I learned this from W. Edwards Deming, who was considered like the father of modern equality. And he actually figured out that if you get the first 15% of any process correct, i.e., the initial conditions, then the other 85% will effortlessly happen. So, what that meant to me was that, okay, if I'm out here in the 85% and it's not working, I'm not getting the results that I want in my business or in my life, that means that there's something wrong in the first 15%, right? Because I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not getting the results. So, but when you're far out in the 85%, it's really difficult to go back to the first 15% because um, it's very difficult to see yourself real from that, from that perspective. So what I would do then, I'd go back and I figured out for businesses all of the things that make up the first 15%. And so literally I can go through all these things in the first 15% and if I can check them to see if they're all structured properly and as strong as possible. And if they're not, then that's where your problem is. You have to fix that problem because when you fix something in the first 15%, then the 85% is all but assured, right? It's going to happen. Does that make sense? So another way to looking at it that I've heard someone else say, and I myself have said this many times, another way of looking at it is that the roots determine the fruits. And so, really, what we're talking about here is cause and effect, right? So, if you're out here in the effect and you're not getting it, well, then you got to get to the root cause, right? And so, really, and a lot of times the root cause is kind of obscured from you because you're thinking that, well, I'm doing this and doing this and doing this, and this is what people are telling me, or consultants or whoever are telling you this is what you need to do, but in fact, back here is where your problem is, and so that is your strategy, right? And it's hard to like one of the challenges that we have, and I've said this to many business owners and people over the years, is that you can't read the label from inside the bottle. And so when you're in the bottle, whether it's you personally or you as a business owner, if you're inside the bottle, it's virtually impossible for you to read the label by virtue of the fact that you're inside the bottle. So someone on the outside, like me, you bring me in, I'm on the outside, so I can read the label. And I can say, oh, here's the problem, right? This is why it's so important to seek help and to seek help from counselors or to seek guidance or go to a professional. Like over the years, I went to therapists, I spoke to therapists, and at first I was hesitant and I had my resistance towards them. But and then I found that when you start to really engage with them, it can be a great. It's literally they're on the outside of the bottle, so they're in a position to be able to help you greatly
Oh, absolutely.
and point
Yeah.
those things out to you, right?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Um, with a therapist, you all to your point, you have to show them everything. So if you are hesitant, you're kind of hiding things, or if you're in the mindset where the world's against you, so you're kind of like, and then they did this, and then they did that. You're not giving them a real picture, and you'll never find the root of your issue and the reason you're sitting in that chair. That's a good point.
Yeah, and you know what? I just want to bring it back to you said something earlier about the future and the past and anxiety and depression, right? One of the things that when you said that to me, it clicked is that one of the things that's really important about what you said is that it has to do with the quality of your thoughts. So it's the future. Anxiety largely comes from obsessive thinking or obsessive thoughts about the future. And most of those obsessive thoughts about the future then are fear and worry and doubt and uncertainty, right? Versus obsessive thoughts about the past, which is dragging up the past. That's everything that's happened to you, and why did things happen the way they did, and how come it happened to me, and so forth, right? So one of the things I learned early on in my early 20s, one of my good friends and mentor was a Buddhist. And so he got me into Buddhism and got me into Lao Tzu and Tao Te Ching and the I Ching and later Feng Shui. And I just kind of started to kind of be exposed to those types of ideas. And I learned that thoughts are things, that thoughts are real, and that most of us, as we go through our days, we're on autopilot. It's been estimated that we have about 14 to 20,000 thoughts a day. And most of the thoughts that we're having today are the same ones that we had yesterday and the same as the ones the day before. So we're largely like repeating just like an autopilot. And so one of the things that I've learned is that when you recognize that thoughts are things, you start to kind of observe yourself. So when you're talking with somebody else, all of a sudden, and you start to observe yourself talking, and you see that you're talking about the past, and a lot of your thoughts go back to what happened last week, last month, and just let me tell you what just happened, and da, 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 and you start, and if you can start to become aware of that, that can really start to help you recognize kind of the foundation or the root cause of your depression, for example. Because if that's the case, right? Because all of a sudden you realize that those thoughts, you're pulling those thoughts here into this moment right now, and you're giving them energy, right? And that this is the breakthrough when you recognize that you're putting energy into those thoughts, and so you're actually keeping it going. You're the one that's actually you're living in it. So to be aware of it, when you become aware of your thoughts and that thoughts are things, that's the beginning of being free of it. And I love that idea that to be aware of it is to be free of it, because now you're starting to recognize it. And, there's no greater source than to help you be completely free of it, and that's God. And so once you start to uh, recognize God all around you, that God is not some entity that we were taught that's living up in the clouds, and that God is right here around us. It's in everything, everywhere, and that we are a part of God. I think Alan Watts, he was one of my favorite writers and speakers, and Alan Watts said um, that we are just like waves in the ocean. And so you have this ocean of consciousness, which is to say, ocean of God, and that we are waves out of that ocean of consciousness. And we come up just like a wave and we go along for a while, but then we go right back into the ocean again, which is to say, we go right back into God, right? And so that's kind of a way of, you know, thinking, when you start to really recognize your own thoughts and the source of those thoughts,
Oh, it's huge, and that's a great
it's huge.
point,
Yeah.
especially if you're living with a regret and you're living in the regret
Mm,
instead of letting it go.
right.
I mean, you're putting hell on in your life for no reason. You're putting stress over nothing. Something that's happened has gone. It's like,
Right.
and then if you look towards future goals and you're still remembering the past failures, it's
Exactly.
going to hinder you from actually going anywhere. No,
Yeah.
that's a great point.
Yeah. Well, and that is so true, because the like in terms of regrets, for example, if you're spending one moment of your time regretting something in the past, you're the only one that's doing that. That's only a memory that exists in a memory file in your computer, right? And that's another analogy that I like to use too, right? Is that this amazing body that we've been given by God, this biomechanical miracle, is connected to the infinity drive, like almost like a Bluetooth is connected to your phone, you know. And this body is the phone, and we're connected to the whole infinity drive, and we just have to recognize that connection, and um, just like that phone, you get the full bars, right? You get all, and the stronger your connection is, the more bars you have, and then you start to find that God is in your life everywhere, and you start to see more and more opportunities. And so when it comes to regret and letting go, it's kind of like, if this was regret and I'm carrying it around on my shoulder, the first thing I need to do is become aware of it, that it's there. And then once I become aware of it, now I'm on the path to being free of it. And now I need to learn to let it go. And so God can be very, God can be the source to help you let that go. And then when you let it go, then you can start to recondition yourself. And because sometimes you're going to find, oh, it's back. Where did that come from? Right? And you go, oh, there's that regret again. Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, well, I just got to let that down. Just set that down here because I can just observe that. That doesn't need to be a part of me. I used to do a thing with I did this with groups of people, like 100 people, and I'd get them to take the pencil or a pen, and I said, I want you to hold it in your hand. Hold the pen or pencil in your hand. I want you to squeeze it tight. Now I said, I want you to think that this pencil or this pen is like a regret, for example. And so you're holding on to this regret, right? And you literally white knuckle, right? You're holding on. I want you to squeeze it really tight. And now I said, here's what I want you to do with that regret, and that the pen you're holding on to, is I slowly want you to open up your hand and just kind of hold it there, right? So now you're holding the pen or pencil in your hand, which is to say the regret or the negative thought, what as you will. And I said, I want you to recognize something, that you're the one that's holding it up. You're giving it support, right? Now, here's the question. I ask you a couple of questions. Could you let that go? Yes or no? And- Right? And most of the people say yes. And then I say, okay, here's question number two. Would you let it go? Now, this is where people will start to say, oh, would I? Well, I don't know. Because now if the regret is this or is that or someone else's fault, all of a sudden the question, would you let it go, becomes conditional, right? Let me ask you again, would you let it go? And then the person says, yes, I would let it go. Okay. Third question, when? When? This moment? Or next week? Or next month? Or next year? Because no matter whatever the point is that you determine when you're going to let it go, it's going to be the same moment as this moment right here. So you can choose to let it go right now, or you can choose to let it go next year. It's still going to be the same moment. And now, just for a moment, just the role play, let's just let it go. And I get everybody to drop the pen. And I say, when you are ready to let go, that's how difficult it is. It's that easy. In the moment that you let it go, it will be just like dropping the pen. It's just everything leading up to that moment of letting it go is the is where all the tension and all the stress and everything leads to, right? The letting go is actually the moment of release, right? If you think about it. But it's the whole tension, it's the build up to that. And when you realize that you're the one that's holding on to it, you're the one that's giving it support, right? So ask yourself those three questions. You can do this. Um, could I let it go? Would I let it go? When? Those three questions, I tell you, I've been through this, can change your life.
Where did you learn that? Did you create?
This is a one I came across Dr. David Hawkins, fantastic author. He's since passed, but he wrote a book that really changed my life called Power versus Force: The Hidden Determinants of Human Behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was very much a part of the whole Sedona movement there. And he wrote a number of books, but his books are literally like they're transformational books.
Okay.
And they're not a quick read book.
Mm-hmm.
They take time because every page gives you something to think about and consider. So I think that's where, if memory serves, it was something that I had read from Dr. David Hawkins.
Okay, very cool.
So he's a great author, great resource for anybody out there that he's very spiritual, but at the same time recognizing the fact that we are at our core energy,
Mm-hmm.
and we're a part of the source of all energy, which is God.
Very. I like that. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah.
Um, something I want to go back to. So you have your marketing company. You just had your first child.
Yeah.
One thing that really interests me is when did you start the comedy club?
Okay, the comedy club. So that was so here we are. I've got the marketing company going. That's going very well. We're building software. Um, so that was another aspect of what we're doing at the time. We had a publishing company going. We had magazines that were going out and monthly newspapers that were going out. So a lot of different activities happening. And we had our second child, my beautiful daughter Amelia, a couple of years after our son William was born. And so we had two children. We're going through, um, you know, all the great things happening in business. I was a workaholic. So as much as I was there for everything that my children were a part of, I can say that I was not always present when I was there. Sometimes you see parents and they go to functions with their children, but they're still checking their phone. I was that kind of person for a while. And then over time, though, I became more and more like, no, I got to turn the phone off. I need to be here. I want to be. If my daughter's playing basketball, I want to be involved in the whole basketball game. I don't want um, to take any phone calls or do any text messaging while I'm here at my daughter's basketball game, for example, right? So we're going through this period. So this is all like mid 2000s, and one Friday night, two of us are tired. My wife was working as a full-time school teacher as well, right? And that's an exhausting job. Any teacher out there will tell you that. So it's a Friday night, and we're saying, let's go do something tonight, right? And my mother-in-law and father-in-law were going to look after the kids on a Friday night, but we had Friday night to ourselves. I was like, well, let's go out somewhere. Let's do something. Let's go somewhere like we used to before we had children. Like we'd go out, go downtown, go dancing, go see a show, something. So we get online and we're searching. And so remember those comedy shows that used to come here to Yuck Yuck's comedy shows? And we used to go out to them at the Holiday Inn, wherever. We always used to enjoy those. I wonder if there any comedy shows. So we Google, go online and search for comedy shows. And no comedy shows comes up, but Yuck Yucks comes up. And so I click on the Yuck Yucks thing, and it's like it shows the Yuck Yucks Comedy Club, and people are there. They're having a few beers and eating nachos, and they're having a laugh at the comic on stage. I'm like, see, like this is what I'd love to do. And my wife said, yes, that'd be awesome to do something like that tonight, wouldn't it? Like to be able to go somewhere and enjoy a few laughs, and actually, because laughing is good for your soul. And so that was a Friday night, and I said, yeah, it's too bad there's not a place around here like that. Well, then Monday morning, I'm on the phone to Yuck Yucks in Toronto saying, what do I have to do to get a Yuck Yucks comedy club there? Right? And so I literally spent about 7 or 8 months trying to find the right location. And then a business associate came on as a partner. And then everything kind of just happened. Next, we were in the comedy club business. And when we first opened here in St. John's, the comedy club, Yuck Yucks Comedy Club, was very successful. Place was filled every weekend, and we had great shows, and it was a beautiful business from one perspective is that people would come with all these problems that are going on in their heads and their lives, and then when they came to the show for 90 minutes, all those problems went away, and they're there. And so this is a good lesson actually, because excuse me, just about thoughts, right? So they come with all these problems, everything that's been going on in their life all week long, and now they're coming to the comedy show. And they're coming, and so what they're thinking about now is the past, everything that they just went through. But now they're thinking about the future. Oh, well, we're going to Yuck Yucks, we're going to have a few laughs, right? Now they come to Yuck Yucks and they're in the audience and they're having their few beers and their nachos and their wings, and the comics are up on stage and everybody is laughing. Well, you realize that you can only laugh in the present moment. You can't laugh in the past or in the future. You can only laugh now. So, one of the beautiful things about the comedy club business is that it takes a room full of people, like 200 people is what we could fit in the club. And 200 people are now in the present moment. And they're there for like an hour, 90 minutes, right? In the present moment. And they're laughing. And the longer that they're in the present moment, the funnier everything becomes. So what happens is by the time the headliner, because usually like there's an MC that comes on, there's a middle act that comes on, or maybe two middle acts, and then there's the headliner. By the time the headliner comes on, the room is so into the present moment that the headliner gets all of that advantage. So that's why they work so hard to become headliners, right? Yeah, the present moment. Nobody is there. Nobody's thinking about the past. Nobody's thinking about next week. They're just here in the comedy club, focused on the next comedian and on the jokes, and everybody's laughing and having a great time, right? And then as soon as the show is over and they're walking out of the comedy club, oh wow, that was a great show. That was a great show. And the next day they're at work and they're going, oh yeah, we went to Yuck Yucks last night. Now they're talking about the past again. Yeah. So you can see how like that's the beautiful thing about live entertainment, right? So I love that aspect of the business. But one thing about comedy clubs is that it's show and business, and the business side of it is very tough because of the talent and the overheads, the expenses, especially here in Newfoundland, having to fly comedians in from the mainland with airfare and accommodations and everything. So it becomes a very expensive kind of proposition, right? So anyway, I did that for we ran the comedy club for 8 years, and at one point we had a second comedy club. We actually opened a second Yuck Yucks in Edmonton, and so that was after the first year that we had the first one here in St. John's. Then we opened one in Edmonton, and so then it was a lot of flying back and forth, and that got old really quick. So anyway, we ended up I got out of that one up in Edmonton, and but we kept everything going here in St. John's, and and through it all, like there were some ups and downs, lots of challenges with the comedy club business here. However, it was, lots of great memories. As I said to you before, lots of people got their start and are out now doing cross Canada tours. And, so I know that just because that Friday night that we were sitting there, because my wife and I, Lori and I, made that decision, um, that, you know, created an environment for those types of people to be able to find their path. And I mean, and that's a blessing, right? Yeah, exactly.
My last question for you
Yep.
is, and I ask this to all of my guests, for any guys out there that are struggling or possibly going through something rough right now, do you have any advice on how they can get to the other side of it?
Well, best advice that I ever got when I was really in the depths of the darkness, per se. And for a while, I did not know that I was as in the depth as much as I actually was. So becoming aware of that was kind of like, whoa, right? It was, shook me to my core. Um, but the one of the best pieces of advice I got, and it was from my landlord actually at the time. I was on a call with him, and we were talking just about challenges that were happening, and I was kind of at my breaking point. And he said to me, he said, Bill, he said, I heard this years ago from somebody. He said, I think it was Winston Churchill who said this, um, but he said, maybe this might help you. When you're going through hell, keep going. and uh, and that was kind of like that moment that kind of like, yeah, you know what, I'm going through hell, but I am not stopping. And so you just keep going, and eventually you will come out the other side of it. You'll come out the other side of it. It's inevitable, right? It can't last forever, but some of it you do need to have. Like I said, I went to therapists, and so talking about what's going on and getting perspective is really helpful. Second biggest thing from that is also meditation. So I started meditating. I meditate regularly. I meditate in the mornings before my eyes are open, and like literally, I'm lying in bed and my eyes are not even opened, and I'm conscious and I'm meditating already. And yeah, it's a really good great time actually, but that's taken time. So meditation very important, um, and having love in your life, in terms of, because I mean God really fundamentally is love, and recognizing love for each other, for your fellow man, recognizing love for your family, your friends, and trying to be kind every day and trying to find ways of, you know, expressing your kindness and expressing love, even if that is something as simple as holding a door. Like you would not believe how many times I leave a business and I stop and I hold the door for someone come behind me, and they're just kind of like shocked. They're like, "Oh, thank you very much." It was like, because even that, like holding a door for somebody, doesn't cost you anything, but it's just another way of being loving towards other human beings, right? And that's the other thing too, is that like everybody has their struggles, and it may seem sometimes like you're the only one that has the struggle, or that, why is this happening to me? Well, it's happening to a lot of people. It's happening to most people on some level, whether it doesn't matter how successful they are, as we said earlier, or what's happening in their life. um, it can be a real challenge. We're all facing those types of challenges. So, giving other people the benefit of the doubt is another great way to kind of express your love. And when you start to kind of go outside of yourself and start to help other people and be kind to other people, um, it's kind of like you're acting like it's like God's will, and like you can feel that going through you, and you want to help. And that is a part of then, it kind of becomes a selfish act, if you will, because you're actually helping yourself.
Yeah. There's a reason it feels good to be kind to people.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic advice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bill, for
Welcome.
coming out. Really
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thank you.